Hello there. So yeah, we'll continue where we left off in the previous getting started video. The only thing I did from the previous project iteration, I would say, is that I disabled the plugin, and reverted the configuration that we did last time, so that I can talk a bit more about it. The purpose of this video is to pretty much do the same we did, but using the new game feature and modular gameplay way of adding an ability system component to your character with abilities, attributes, and yeah. Those game feature and modular gameplay are really powerful, and really I'm pretty excited for it because I really think it's going to improve the way we approach gameplay programming and how to implement features that are self-contained. Will encourage encapsulation of things. It's really an awesome thing they added to the engine. To start it off, to be able to use game features and modular gameplay, there's two plugins that you need to enable, which is modular gameplay and game features. But if we go to the gameplay category with a gas companion, if you enable it, it's going to enable those two plugins for you because it has dependency on it, and it needs to be enabled. So if we restart the engine with gas companion enabled, we should see modular gameplay game features enabled and some prompts on the first load related to the configuration and settings for the game. In UE5 right now, and not in 4.2.7, if you enable the game feature plugin, the engine on first load will warn you with this prompt, which is related to the asset manager settings, and you have to add some config to the default game INI for game features to actually work and be able to affect the game. And to do that, they added this prompt in UE5, which I try to backport into the modular gas companion editor, new module, so that you can just click on this link and it's going to add the config for you. The other thing I did with this project is that I set it up a Git repo just to be able to see the diff, and so that when I click on this link, that you should do once, it's going to edit for you the default game INI with the proper settings, and so that you are good to go. The other thing we need to do, and it's really specific to 4.2.7 and gas companion actually, is to this prompt is about game feature project policies, which is a class that the subsystem will use that sets up some behavior and condition and rules for game features into your game. It's not needed in UE5, it's not actually needed in 4.2.7, it's just there for modular gas companion to edit the way game feature plugins are handled by default by the engine, so that when you edit the uplugin file with the built-in plugin state property in the uplugin file, it's going to take that value to know if the game feature should be active or not active when the game starts or load, and mimics the same behavior that is done in UE5. The other thing that this project policies do is to add some observers to the game feature so that it can react to plugin state, game feature plugin state changing, so that it can update the game feature customization for the data asset, which I'm going to go through. So yeah, just click it once and it's going to add those two lines to the INI, and then you can restart the editor. And since those configs are now set up, we should not have any prompt anymore. Just so we have better understanding, of what those configures. For the asset manager, is going to edit this settings and set it up exactly how you need it for the game feature plugins to work. And for the project policies, it's just editing this game feature manager class. And the default one, if you don't bother with this config, is going to be the engine default game feature project policies. And modular gas companion specific subclass of it just adds some specific behavior for 427 to be able to add as much close and as close a developer experience that you would be getting with UI5 for game features. So with that done, maybe we should go through really quickly about what we did in the last video. We just have the basic map from the third person template that we duplicated. We set it up a game mode with some gameplay framework class that we need to do. We'll do it for the game feature for this video actually. But if I hit play, we got through the setup of the ability system. We added some attributes to it, initialized it. We created a HUD for it, and we created a basic jump ability that is costing costs some stamina to jump, and we added a regen effect for the stamina, and that's pretty much what we did. And in this video, we're going to do the same thing, but with a game feature. So maybe we should start by creating a game feature plugin. Added in this V3 version of Gas Companion is a new entry in the dropdown right here, is to bring up a new wizard that will allow you to create game feature from plugins from the editor. In UI5, that's something you would find with this standard new plugin button. Right there, it's not a game feature plugin, it's just going to a content only plugin. And and if you have the game features enabled, plugin enabled with UI5, you would see another entry that is going to allow you to create a game feature plugin. It's not in 427 right now, so that's something Gas Companion added to add the same functionality for 427. We need a name, but just to mention it because it's pretty important to know. The game feature wizard and the engine will require the game feature plugin to be within a specific folder, which is your project plugins folder and a game feature subfolder. And every game feature plugin will live in this folder. The wizard won't let you create a plugin if you're not within this path. Let's start with just a test feature, test game feature, and there we are not going to go through Gas Companion specific code, but just to demonstrate the use of a super basic game feature that is going to add a component to our target actor and just print some stuff to see the component activated. So when you create the plugin, the wizard will create a data set for you and the structure for the plugin, which is pretty simple and consists of one data set that is a specific child of game feature data, and is going to give you the possibility to specify what the game feature is actually doing. Here is a specific editor extension. It's a detailed customization, and it's going to add the possibility for you to change the state of the game feature plugin. This button is a way for you to edit the uplugin file and set up the initial state of the game feature. So if you need the game feature to be in a specific state when the game starts or the editor starts for the first time, that's where you need to change the state. So if you don't want the game feature to be active, you set it up to either install registered or logged. But if you want it to be active at startup, you would set it to active, and the default is active. Right now it's active. We have a little warning there that reminds us to not forget to deactivate the game feature before editing it. So, and it's particularly important if you have the game playing in background in Pi. So yeah, make sure to set it up to. I like to go through the registered state to be able to change the game feature itself. What we should see is now that we have a new plugin that is a game feature plugin. It's not within the base game, the content folder, and and we have data game feature data, which is exactly the same name as the plugin name. The next thing we need to do is actually to have a character and a map to test it out. So to keep things separate from what we did in the previous video, I'm going to do another map and character and do it from scratch again. But I will try to do it a bit more quickly this time. New folder, tutorial game feature, tutorial GF, create a map folder. I copied the previous map, and if I duplicate it, I'm going to have it there. Rename it GF map. We open it up. We clear game mode because that's something I want to explain it again right there. So we need a game mode for the map, just to be able to set up some gameplay framework class, particularly in specific the pawn class and the player controller class. So we can go with the game mode base by default. It's going to be fine. BP modular GF. Let's go for the GF for everything in this video. Game mode. We set it up right there so that it's associated with the map. Open it up. That I need. So open it up again so that I have it in widescreen. So yeah, the first thing we need to do is to ensure that we are using the correct pawn class for the character, and to be able to use game features and to have actions in game features, be able to add stuff to your character. The character needs to tell the system that it's a candidate for it. So the 3 pawn class that you could use in your the BP modular character is from the previous video, is either one of these 3. It's either a modular character, so you extend from the modular character. If you want to use a pawn, you could use the modular pawn, and if you want to go through the setup of having the ability system on the player state, that's the class that you would use. Let's go for the modular character. The player controller class is pretty important too. You need to use the modular player character, the controller. It's needed in specific for the input binding, and it's going to set it up for you. And I think in UE5 you won't need it because some API changed in the pawn class that I couldn't edit for 4.2.7, so that's something that is done with those class, and it's just about the pawn being able to register inputs with the game feature actions right there. But let's not go into too much low-level details. I think we're good there. For the HUD class, you can leave it as is. It's not strictly needed right now, but I would encourage you to use the GEC HUD, which is from previous version of Gas Companion, the V2, and it's still useful to have to handle some UI related stuff. So we have our game feature. Before going through the specific of the game feature actions added by AddComponents, I think it could be nice just to demonstrate the use of the most common and used action with game features, which is the AddComponents from engine. You have all of this available to you. The one in engine right now are these four, the add sheets, which is a way for you to add debug commands and sheet commands to the game when the feature is active, which is really cool if you need to add some debug ability. The AddComponents is the one we're going to use, which is a way for you to add components based on the active state of the game feature to any actor in the game that is telling the system that is a candidate for the game feature component manager. The data registry stuff is something I don't have a lot of knowledge of, didn't play with it yet, but I think it's related to the asset manager and how you would add some items and primary data set to your game. But I could be totally wrong with it. And the one added by AddComponents are marked with modular AddComponents in parentheses. They are close and coming and inspired from the ancient demo for the specific to the ability system. So we have the AddAbilities, the AddInputMapping, and the AddAnim layers, which is specific to modular AddComponents and implement the same system that you would see in the ancient demo with the way they are able to add animation blueprint, linked anim layer from within a game feature. But they are doing it with a component that they use with the AddComponents action, and this action is just a refactor of it to be able to do it directly from a game feature action. Okay, so well, I think a good thing to demonstrate would be to not go through the setup of a ModularCharacter right now, but just try to use the third-person template blueprint that we have with the third-person template that we added in the previous video by just add import, add feature content pack, and then clicked on this one that added all the assets needed for this demo. So we are using this third-person character and we're going to add a component to it. So maybe you should go through the setup of setting up the component itself, which is going to be an actor component, and it's going to be really simple. On begin play and end play, it's going to print some string to the screen. Test component, and let's really quickly set it up so that we have a visual feedback on the screen when it's active. So on begin play, test component activated. On end play, we'll do the same. And maybe print also the reason that we get with this event to format text. Copy paste the link here and some parameter and a reason, and that now we can pass it right there by converting to a string and play, and we are good to go. So for the end play and begin play, we're good. Maybe on tick also, just to have something going on when it is active. We pass the data seconds to the duration so that it doesn't spam the screen, and test component active. Pretty simple, pretty basic, not really fancy, but so that we have something to explain and cover there. So we're going to go for the component. We are missing something right now. If I try to activate the game feature is active, but not added to the character. Let me go through the correct map. Third person example. So that's the third person character blueprint that we are using in the game feature. And if I activate, if I hit play, we don't see any print on screen. Why? It's because in the third person blueprint, I just check out why the character wasn't the correct one. It was just because I was playing as a client mode and playing in standalone, so the auto process wasn't working for it. So now that I'm controlling the correct character, we see that the game feature is active right now, but not adding the test component. That's because there's a really important setup to do, which is handled by the modular character if you extend from it. But since it's just a character right now, it's not done, and you need to handle it manually. So you would get the subsystem for the Game Framework Component Manager, and there's one function to call on begin play. It's the add receiver. It's basically telling the system add this actor, the receiver, so we need to pass in ourselves as a receiver to tell the system that this actor and all child of it are going to be a candidate to receive components from the game feature action. And to keep stuff a bit clean, we need to do the same and clean up what we did on end play when the character is destroyed or unspawned. So you would get the same thing from the subsystem. Instead of add receiver, you would do the remove receiver, which is removing the actor from the subsystem. So we're good to go right there, and if I hit play, we should see the component active right now. It's active on the print string. So that was just to demonstrate how you would add components to any character in a game, and then now we'll go through the actual game feature for the ability system. We can maybe go to the map right now that we did before and create a new game feature plugin. The idea I had in mind was to, instead of doing a jump ability in this video, we could probably use an ability that is using an animation montage. And since we are going to use the enhance input new system, we'll play with some input related task within the gameplay ability to end the ability when we release the button. And to do that, we're going to use an animation pack from the marketplace, which is in the permanently free collection. It's the mocap online animation pack. So the test feature I want to name as MCO feature. Let's keep it simple. Create plugin. So it's going to create a new game feature data set for us. A new plugin, which is MCO game feature. And now let's go through the import of the animation pack, so that we can use it in the ability. Yes, MCO. And if I go to the marketplace, I'll put the link in the description. It's within the permanently free collection, and is a nice pack of a few animations that we can use just for demonstration purpose in this video. Let's go to the project, which is Gas Companion Tuto. Add it to the project, and it's good to go. Just really quickly, since we are using the skeleton from the third-person character in this tutorial, to be able to use the montage, we need to either retarget the animation we're going to use, but right there I'm going just to replace the skeleton. Since it's using pretty much the same skeleton, it will work. I just need to replace the reference in all reference assets to the one we're using in the third person template. Save, fix approach directions, go back there. Could do the same for the skeleton mesh and use the one from the third person template. Yes, once again, fix approach directions, and I think now this folder is not used anymore. The map, and now we have just one animation folder with everything we need. Okay, let's open it. It's not the correct game feature, it's MCO feature, and right there we're going to set up some actions, but before that we need a character for it, and like we did in the previous video, we're going to create a new character extending from the modular character. MCO character, and yeah, the thing that the modular character is going to do for you is the stuff we had to do for the third person template blueprint, which is going to add ourselves as a receiver for in begin play and clean up on end play. So it's going to handle everything for you. So yeah, one additional thing that modular character does is to set up some hook for the game feature actions that is needed for the AddAbilities and AddInputMapping using an actor, how would I call it? An actor event extension system that is needed for these AddComponents. It's a bit more involved than just the AddComponents receiver, and allow actions to enhance your character when this event is triggered by the system. Let's set up the character. So, like we did in the previous one, we'll keep the third person character from the third person template as a reference. Set up the mesh, the same. Set up the animation BP. Let's go to the viewport. The same animation blueprint. Set up the location. -88 is usually a good value for it. For the standard mannequin, -90, and we're good to go. We need the camera. And one additional thing is the orient rotation that we did in the previous video, but it would be better to just have it visual on the map. So we're using the BPGF game mode. We need to not forget to update the pawn for it that we just created, which is BP MCO character. And if we play, we can't move because I forgot to bring up all the inputs. Let's go back here, remove the VR stuff that we're not going to use, the touch. If I compile, I get 2 warnings because I'm missing those 2 variables. And we're good to go. And now I should be able to move. And we have this problem of the orient rotation that we got from before also with the first video. And there's a few values we need to change in the character movement component, orient rotation to movement. And the other one is in the class default of the character, and is the controller rotation U that we need to disable. that now we can rotate to the velocity of the character, and the direction is going to. Okay, we're good to go for the character. It's a modular character, so yeah, everything is set up for the game feature to actually work. There's some validation going on when you edit a game feature. It's right now complaining about adding an action with a non-action. And the one we're going to use is the AddAbilities action, which is related to the ability system and is a way for you to add to the target act, like we did with the game with the action for AddComponents. We set up an actor class and then a list of abilities and a list of attributes we want to grant when the game feature is active. So let's use our MCO character that we just set it up, and right now another validation error, which is that complaining that we're not granting any abilities or any attributes. So let's start with maybe just the attributes. Right now, if I hit play, we see that we don't have any attributes on the character. We have an ability system component, but no attributes. And that's something we can do with the attribute set, the granted attributes. So like we did previously, we're going to use a GAC attribute set, which is going to add, and is within a guest component plugin, and provide it for you so that you have some attributes you can use that are really common in game, which is the health, stamina, and mana. So if I just set it up like this, so no, we have no error anymore in the validation. Yeah, I can just hit play. It's not active right now, the game feature, so we shouldn't have any attributes, but if I activate it, we see that all these attributes are granted when the feature is active. If I deactivate it, remove. So that's working really cool. We could probably now use this little property, which is a data table that you can use to initialize your attribute set. We did it with the previously, and right there we are going to do the same really quickly. So from there, in the game feature plugin, I'm going to create an abilities folder for everything related to gas, and now we need to create the data table, and you can do it from the miscellaneous file context menu category data table, and then you need to pick the row structure, which is attribute metadata. dt mco attributes, and we have this possibility to initialize the attributes with this data table. And the first column, the row name, is needs to follow a specific syntax, which is the name of the attribute set you want to initialize, the class, the name of the class, which is in this case GAC attribute set, then dot, then your attribute itself, and then you can use the base value to set it up. So let's say 1000 in this example. The min value, max value can stack are not really, as far as I can tell and test it, it's not implemented in ModularCharacter, so they have no effect. But the base value definitely works. That's another thing that we covered in the first getting started video. And just so that we have health going on, I'm setting up the max health and the health attribute. The max health is the higher bound of the clamping for the health that is done within the GAC attribute set, and so that the health will be contained and from 0 to the value of the max health we are setting there. And just to have it visually in the HUD we are going to create, let's set it to 800 so that we have 80% of the health bar filled in. Let's deactivate, use our data table, hit play, show debug, ability system, and when you activate, we see that we have the max health at 1000 and health, so the initialization data table is taking effect. So that's good to go. The thing we did in the last time is that we created the HUD on begin play for the character, so that we have a visual representation in the game of the attributes. But the whole point of game feature is to have your code and feature for the game self-contained and encapsulated, so that it's in this case and tutorial we'll try to do everything we did directly in the blueprint of the character, but dynamically with the game feature. So to be able to add the HUD without having to edit this blueprint, we can maybe use the AddComponents action in the previous that we demonstrated just before. And this component is going to be added to the same character. And the role of the actor component we're going to use is just to create the HUD for us and attach it to the player screen. So let's create the actor component. Let's call it BP HUD component. HUD component, so our game feature is ready to go. And now we need to set up the actual component itself. As usual, a little point string HUD component activated, and now we can create the HUD like we did before. But the scenario here is a bit different, so we don't have access to the controller directly, but since we're within an actor component, we can get the owner, which is going to return the actor that this component is attached to, and there's a lot of casting that is going to go through there, but follow along. So we need to create the HUD, we need to have a reference to the player controller. And since the actor doesn't have access to it, since it's rated to pawn, we need to cast to at least the pawn class, which is going to allow us to get the controller, which is just an A controller, not a player controller, and we need the player controller. So since we know it's a player controller, we can safely cast to it. And from there, we can get a reference to the HUD. And since we know that the HUD is going to be a JC HUD, we can cast to JC HUD, which is a C++ class coming from Gas Companion, and is going to allow us to get access to the API we used before. And you can use the create HUD method and get the result and add to player screen. There's a lot of casting going on, but you're just doing it once when the component is taking effect and hitting a begin play. I know that it won't work. It will work, the HUD will appear on screen, but it won't. Actually, it does. We have the bar filled in correctly. That's good to know. That's something we didn't handle like we did before, is that now the game feature is inactive, we still have the HUD, so that's something we need to handle and clean up when the component is ending and removed from the character. And we pretty much need to get a reference to the HUD created before and remove it from the player screen. So to do that, I need to promote that to a variable, it up right there, target, and now we can, sorry, use that there. And now that we have the HUD widget reference, we'll convert that to a validated gate so that we are sure that it's valid and available for us to remove from viewport of actually parent when the component is removed. So yeah, feature not active, active, registered. It's going to clean up the HUD for us. Maybe we could talk about the client component, server component. It's just basically telling the system what it should do on each scenario, if it's running on the clients, if it should add a component, if it's running on server or not. By default, it's going to do both. But since we're using this component specifically to add HUD, which is client only to the game, could totally go and untick the server, make sure that we're using the client component, and yeah. Not good. Just for demonstration, if you do the contrary, you should expect nothing on screen, because there's no player controller on the server, and you wouldn't be able to do that right there. So yeah, the thing that I was expecting is what we see when the game feature is active when the game starts, so that we don't have the health bar filled in. That's because when you use the game feature in that specific use case, when this component activates, it actually triggers and kicks in all this logic just before the game feature AddAbilities add any chance to add the attribute. So to handle this, you would just need to, I know it's not super elegant, but you would just need to add a little delay to it, even a 0 delay, to kicking all this logic of creating the HUD in the next frame, so that the attributes have time to be granted to the character. Just to test it out, what does happen if I client? Yeah, it's working in client, but not on server or standalone, because the component for the client scenario is going to be added and trigger the begin play just after. There's a slight delay in the replication of the component, so that's why the attribute is ready when we create the HUD. But let's go back to the standalone and try to fix that by just adding a little delay. Even 0 I think would work. And let's test it out. Yeah, I know it's not the best, but for now it will do. I may try to add some possibility to register a delegate or an event when the game feature is activated from the subsystem, so that we can update the HUD from when the game feature is active, and not rely on a key delay like this. But for now it will do. Okay, the next thing we could do is yeah, just grant a new ability to the character that is going to play a montage, and so that we have the full overview of this particular game feature action. So yes, this granted abilities is an array of abilities and optional input action you want to grant to the character. It's very similar to what we've seen previously with adding it directly with the ability system component, with the MGC ability system component, and those attributes right there. It's actually the same, pretty much the same structure. Ability, input action, granted attributes, an attribute you want to use, and an initialization data. And right there, we find the same setup. We'll need an ability and we'll need an input action to be able to activate it. So let's go back and create it. in the AddAbilities folder, I'm going to use an animation I like from MCO, which is the power walk animation. Before going to the setup of the ability, maybe you should just create the actual animation assets. The power walk, I want to use the root motion one, and let's create a new anim montage from there. I like to prefix them with AM, remove the suffix montage. Okay. So yeah, that's the animation we're going to use. One thing I like to check is that since I'm going to use the root motion, even though it's in the root motion folder within the anim pack, sometimes and yeah, most of the time it's not enabled. This little checkbox is not checked by default, so be sure to check it out with every root motion you're going to use on an animation pack, because sometimes it's just not done for you. So now that's done, we can move those animations from the base content folder in the game to have it self-contained within the abilities, the game feature itself. Let's create an animation folder. We have it here, and we need the power walk and the sequence. Move it right there. I don't think it's needed, but I like to fix the projections every time I move an asset. So we have the animation right there, and now we can start using it. So let's create a new gameplay ability. From within the context menu, usually you want to use this little category, gameplay ability blueprint, and then you pick up the parent class for your gameplay ability. We could totally use the regular classic gameplay ability from the ability system plugin in engine. But I would recommend that for Gas Companion that you use the JSC gameplay ability. It's not needed, it's just adding those little functionality, added functionality compared to the regular one that you can take some time to read through. But yeah. GA power walk. And it's going to be super simple. The first thing I like to do is just to commit the ability, so that if I have any cost added to the ability, it's going to take some effect and spend the cost at this time. If the commit fails, important to also end the ability, and it's important to end it on every branch and flow of your gameplay ability, so that you end it when it needs to be ended. Otherwise, the game feature would live in forever. And unlike the jump ability we did in the previous one, we're going to use another approach and task. Here is the play montage, not the regular play montage one, not this one. We want to use either one of these tasks. The play montage and wait is the one available in engine right now, and the other one is the slight variation of it, is the play montage and wait for event, which is pretty much the same, except that it has a possibility to set up some tags here, event tags that are going to listen for, and at any point within the animation, if the owner character is going to receive this gameplay event, this pin would trigger, and that's how you would, for instance, handle damage and apply some gameplay effect when you receive the gameplay effect. So, for instance, if you have a component, a collision system in your game that is going to register it from your character to an enemy, for instance, you will send a particular event to the owner of the ability with some information right there in the event data, so that you can apply the gameplay effect to the correct target. But that's out of the scope of this video. So you could use this one or this one, but let's use this one. We need the animation montage that we created just before. We can, even though we are using the wait for event, we're not forced to use the anything right there, since we don't need to listen for anything. What we want is just to see the character moving on and playing the montage. I think we are good to go right there. So since I described earlier, you need to end the ability at some point, and the way to do it with most of the time with the play montage task is to make sure that the ability is ended in either or all of these these little events, so that they're tied to the animation montage. So if the montage is interrupted, blending out, or cancelled, it's going to trigger the ability, and if it's going to go through the whole montage, it's going to trigger the completed. So usually, and most of the time, you want to end the ability on each one. Okay, we're good to go. I think the ability itself is done. We don't need to have cost or anything. We just need to grant it to the character when the game feature is active. So that's the GA for work. Actually, that's something we need now more. If I go to the gameplay debugger, so with show debug ability system, and then with this little command ability system.debug.next category twice to go through the abilities page, we have what we need to see that the feature is active and actually granting the power work. But since we don't activate it on input right now, we have no way to actually see it in play. Something you could do from the character directly and set up the input, etc. But since we have the whole point of game feature and the enhanced input system integrated with it is to be able to set up some enhanced input action to be able to activate the gameplay ability associated with it. So yeah, let's create the enhanced input stuff. Those two. Create a folder for it. Before going through this, I think it's pretty important to mention that you need to set up the project to be able to use enhanced input, and we did it in the first video. So we changed the player input class from player input to enhanced player input, and the same for the input component class from input component to enhanced input component. And with this, the project is set up to use enhanced input. Also, with enhanced input, that's something you need to do to be able to use input action in your game, for your character or controller, is that you need to initialize and add the mapping context to your character. And I think it's enhance input, the local one that you would get from the player controller, pass in the player controller, and then you add the mapping context right there. But in this setup with the game feature, we're going to do it a bit differently, which is with another game feature action, which is the add input mapping, that allows you to push and add the mapping context to any player controller active in the world right now. So that would affect the character, and so that the character could use input action that we're going to set up in the mapping context. Yeah, we need two assets for the input. The first one is going to be the action itself, the input action. I like to name it with the action and not the binding. I'm going to use the left shift for this scenario. For the input action itself, you can just create it and leave it as is. For most of the time, that's the behavior you want. You have some configuration right there that you can set up. The triggers one is probably the most important, and so that you can configure how the input action is going to be handled by the engine. And you have a little description for each one of them that you can recommend it to read through. But if you look at the down one, it's actually the default behavior if you don't specify any triggers, and that's the usual case of pressing an input and triggering the started and completed when the input is pressed. So we can leave it as is. We're going to go for the action. Now we need an input context, which is where you set up the binding for each action you want to have in this context. So it's going to be the power walk, and we're going to use the left shift button for it. We're okay for this. Let's unregister, add the input context we just created. Right there you have the possibility to change the priority for the mapping context, so that the engine knows when you press the input knows how to handle the input based on the priority of each input mapping available on the controller right now. You could use one just higher than the one you would use in the player controller in the character, so that you can override some input from within the game feature when it's active. And yeah, we're not doing it in this scenario, in this tutorial, but yeah, that's good to know that you have this possibility of adding mapping context with an higher priority or importance for the game that is going to consume input and not override them if you need this functionality. So we have everything we need now. Just set up the action, we have the input context, and now if I hit play, show the game feature is not active right now. If I activate it and try to left shift, it's going to play the montage. It's actually not playing correctly because it's playing the montage, and since it's a root motion, it's moving the capsule, so we see the character moving like I would do if I am pressing the input. And the reason it's not playing the full montage, we see that we are missing the correct. You see the arms and the hand are not actually animated. It's because of something I forgot to do is to set up the animation slot. It's reusing the default one right there, but the animation BP that we're using from the third person template is actually not using any montage slot right now. So that's why the montage is not playing actually. So if I set up a slot right there, we have the whole locomotion of the third person coming from there, and we just need to set up the slot at some point in the anim graph, and just before we output the pause. And now, if I hit play, we should see the animation going fine. Okay. And when the animation is ending, it's going to end the ability. You could see when I press the input or read it, it's going to change a bit the gameplay debugger. And that's something that we can leverage now, and I'm going to demonstrate and end up the video on this. GA power walk, let's clean up everything we don't need. And yeah, since the input system and is set up to bind the activation for this ability, and that's something we couldn't use with a previous gas companion, the V2, is to use task related to input, like input, release, or press. Yeah. And in this scenario, the thing I want to do is use the task related input release, just right there. So when the ability goes through, it's going to trigger the montage right after wait input release. You could do just before, it's the same. And then it's going to allow us to use this task to react to the input being released by the player. And in this scenario, we're just going to end the ability itself. And ending the ability, will trigger the stop of the montage when the ability ends right there. So that's pretty much the desired behavior, and that's it. Input read it, just to have it a little feedback on the screen, and yeah, that's it. As always, show debug, next category, keep the shift button pressed, and if I just tap it, we see the montage starting, ending, and yeah, we have everything working on like we wanted, and yeah, that's pretty much all I wanted to cover in this video, so that you have a little overview for how using a game feature in your game. Just to demonstrate that right now, if I try to left shift, it doesn't have any effect, and if I activate in the game, it's going to go through all the features we added to the character. So yeah, we got through the using a game feature to add some attributes to your game, to the character you want, dynamically adding the HUD and removing from the player screen when the feature is inactive, and granting a new ability with an enhanced input bound action that is going to play the montage we want. So yeah, with that said, if you have any feedback or question or anything, let me know, and yeah, I would be super happy to hear about your feedback about this whole new way of thinking about the ability system into your game with a game feature, self-contained little features that you can enhance the game or deactivate the game based on your use case and scenario. And yeah, that's pretty much all I wanted to cover, and pretty excited about this whole thing of game feature and modular gameplay. With that, see you in the next video. Thanks.